people in your life whose opinion you have been managing for years, not consciously, not sort of cynically, but in a way that you know which topics to avoid with certain people, you know which version of yourself to present in which room, you know the specific things that would make certain people think less of you, and you have been quietly clever in the way you have been managing. So this is the kind of person that other people are immediately comfortable around. They have this extraordinary ability to make whoever they are with feel understood, valued, and put them at ease. So this person could end up becoming totally exhausted in a way that they will not be able to explain. Not tired from overwork, but tired from the exhaustion that comes from spending enormous amount of energy every day managing how you appear to the people around you. There are some people who actually craft what they are going to say in a room with different people at different times. They are not being their true selves. They are just going to say what they think will seek approval from others. So they never are genuinely speaking the truth. And before you tell yourself that is just social intelligence, that is just knowing how to read a room. And I want you to sit with the harder version of that truth. There are people in your life whose opinion of you have been managing for years. So let me repeat that again. People in your life whose opinion you have been managing for years, not consciously, not sort of cynically, but in a way that you know which topics to avoid with certain people, you know which version of yourself to present in which room, you know the specific things that would make certain people think less of you, and you have been quietly clever in the way you have been managing those conversations. This is not unusual. This is not weakness. This is extraordinarily common amongst people. But here is where it becomes a problem. For most people, this careful management of other people's perceptions is not a strategy that they consciously choose. It is a pattern that was installed in them long before they were old enough to examine it. And for some people, and you will know by the end of this episode whether you are one of them, it did not stay as a social skill, it became an identity. The need for approval stopped being something they occasionally sought. It became the operating principle around which their whole life has been organized. Every decision, every question they even pose to a person sitting in front of them. What will this person think? What is it that I want them to think? Not what do I want? What do I genuinely believe? It's all about, what will this person think of me? That is the second type of personality archetype that we are discussing. The person who is a approval seeker. We've discussed in the previous episode the God complex archetype, the person who's always pushing themselves forward, taking up the space, needing to be right and dominant in the room. But the approval seeker is the ego doing the opposite, retreating, shrinking, building the life that is specifically structured around never being seen clearly enough to be genuinely judged. And this is the approval seeker. Maybe it's you, maybe it's somebody in your family, someone you know very, very well. Let me tell you about a typical approval seeker. Let's say the other people are immediately comfortable around. They have this extraordinary ability to make whoever they are with feel understood, valued, and put them at ease. So this person could end up becoming totally exhausted in a way that they will not be able to explain. Not tired from overwork, but tired from the exhaustion that comes from spending enormous amount of energy every day managing how you appear to the people around you. At work, you are just agreeable, accommodating, the one who smooths conflict before it develops, the one who takes on extra when someone else is struggling, the one whose opinion in a meeting is expressed carefully, sort of calibrated not to land too strongly, not to create friction, not to make people around them feel uncomfortable. And at home with their family, maybe they act differently, more relaxed but still careful. Certain topics are avoided, certain opinions kept to themselves, certain feelings expressed and others managed quietly. So this person has a different persona with friends, colleagues at work, and friends in their social circle and their family. And here is what is most painful about this. This person may not necessarily be performing as well, because they genuinely care about the people in each of these rooms. But there is a confusion. Caring about people with needing them to approve of them. So this is the confusion. And the need for their approval has become so deeply embedded in how these people operate that they do not separate it from genuine care, even if they tried. So the result is a life that looks from the outside like someone who has it all together, and feels from the inside like someone who has no idea who they actually are, because they are not being truly genuine to themselves. So this approval seeking type of a person, what is it that they look like in practice? Not in the extreme version, in the version that most people living the system would recognize as themselves if they were to honestly look hard enough to be able to recognize themselves. The approval seeker does not usually lie. That is not their way of doing things or their pattern. Their pattern is more subtle than lying. It is this consistent habit of softening what they actually think. The opinion offered with so many qualifications that by the time it lands, it has very little meaning, really. It's not, it doesn't carry the same weight that it should. The genuine disagreement is reframed as a question so it cannot be received as a challenge. The honest feeling translated into something more palatable before it is expressed. Watch how an approval seeker in a conversation, they try to genuinely disagree with something being said. They will not say, I disagree with that. They will say something like, that is interesting. I wonder if there is another way of looking at it, or then offer their actual view, wrapped in so many layers of deference that the other person often does not even register that as a disagreement or a challenge. This is not cowardice, it is a highly sophisticated social skill. As I mentioned before, it could be seen as social intelligence. But this is where this is not, it's social or emotional intelligence if it's practiced selectively with certain people that you know that this strategy will work with them in order to change their opinion. But if they are using this across the board with majority of the people they interact with, then this is how this will become a prison for them. And the approval seeker in a close relationship presents a specific and painful dynamic, because a person who needs to be approved of by everyone cannot be fully honest with anyone. Think about that for a moment. Look, genuine intimacy requires willingness to be seen fully, accurately, including the parts that are not easy to love. It requires the ability to disagree, to hold a position, to say, this is not acceptable to me, and mean it. The approval seeker cannot do these things without enormous internal conflict, because every act of genuine expression carries the risk of the other person's disapproval, and that disapproval, in the eyes of the approval seeker's operating system, is not just an unpleasant feeling, it is a threat to something that feels fundamental. So instead of genuine intimacy, the approval seeker offers something that looks like intimacy, warmth, attentiveness, the ability to make the other person feel completely understood. But underneath a careful distance, a version of themselves that has been curated for this specific person's approval, never being true to themselves and fully seen, never fully like revealing the true character. And they wonder sometimes with genuine bewilderment why their relationships feel somehow less real than they should. Perhaps the clearest expression of the approval seeker pattern is the way it governs decisions. Not just big life decisions, the small ones, the daily ones. Where to eat, what to wear, which opinion to express, which opportunity to pursue. For most people, these decisions involve checking in with their own preferences and then choosing. But for the approval seeker, there is an extra step that happens so automatically, it is almost invisible. Before the preference is acted on, they run a scan in their brain. What will this look like? What will people think? Will this gain approval or lose it? And the preference, the genuine internal preference, gets filtered through that scan before it is expressed. Sometimes it survives, oftentimes it gets sort of replaced entirely with whatever is most likely to be better received by the people whose opinion matters to the approval seeker. And the approval seeker type of a person thinks that they're being considerate. Really, what they are doing is they are killing their own genuine self. Now, let's go underneath and analyze this behavior to see what's actually driving it. Because the approval seeker is not somebody who's simply just a people pleaser, not simply someone who just lacks confidence. They are someone whose operating system learned very early on that love and approval are the same thing. And that approval must be earned continuously through correct behavior, through the suppression of anything that might displease. And the withdrawal of approval is not just uncomfortable, it is dangerous for them. And this is why it's so important for them to be constantly seeking approval from others. This lesson almost always comes from the original environment, the family system, childhood experiences, the early relationships. Sometimes it comes from a parent whose love was genuinely conditional, who was warm and present when the child performed correctly, and cold or absent when they did not. And this child learned this is how love works. You earn it, you maintain it, you do not risk it by being difficult or demanding or too much. Sometimes it came from an environment where conflict was genuinely dangerous, where expressing it led to a disproportionate amount of consequences, where the safest strategy was to become whatever the environment needed you to become. The child learned visibility is a threat. The safest way to exist is to be approved of. The most dangerous thing you can do is be genuinely yourself. Sometimes it came from a peer environment, a social group, a group in school, a community where belonging was conditional or conformity, and the cost of nonconformity was exclusion. So the teenager in school learns that fitting in is survival, standing out is a risk, and then being liked is more important than being honest. Whatever the specific origin, the lesson was the same. Your genuine self, unfiltered, unmanaged, fully expressed, is not safe. And that lesson became the operating principle long after the environment that installed it had been left behind. So those childhood experiences carry into adulthood. The tragedy of the approval seeker is not that they care too much about what people think. It is that they never got to find out what would happen if they stopped, because a fear of disapproval is so well established, so deeply embedded, so thoroughly integrated into how they operate, that the experiment of simply being genuinely themselves has never been run long enough to produce real data. And this is something I've seen witness in my own life. When we're in a social gathering, we end up having shallow conversations with people, so we don't risk upsetting them. We don't challenge them. We just have very much shallow, low level talk, because we think that if we go deep, if we really start asking those genuine questions, it's going to upset people. And this is played out in almost every room. Maybe there are times where you have to have small talk because you don't know the person well enough to be able to express something genuine. But this is personally something that I do not like. I personally do not like small talk in a room. And this is what is playing out majority of the times in social circles. So many people never discover that people worth keeping in their life would have stayed even if they had been honest. Even these social gatherings, we avoid the real deep conversations. People never discover that disapproval is also survivable. They've never discovered that the exhaustion of managing perceptions costs far more than the occasional discomfort of genuine self expression. They are still operating on data collected in an environment that no longer exists, protecting themselves from a threat that left the room years ago. And this is what I want to shine a mirror to each and every single one of you listening. Let me bring this into your own experience. And I want to invite you to be genuinely honest rather than just assessing this at a shallow level. The kind of honesty that looks at the question, decides it does not fully apply, and moves on. So let's look at this. Think about the last time you were in a group setting, whether it's at work or in a social function or in a family get together, and someone expressed an opinion you fundamentally disagreed with. What did you do? Did you express your genuine disagreement clearly and directly? Or did you soften it, qualify it, frame it as a question rather than a position? Agree with the parts you could agree with and let the rest pass. Now ask yourself honestly, why did you do that? Was it a genuine assessment that this was not worth addressing, or was there a calculation from your part, however quick, however automatic, about how expressing the disagreement would cost you in terms of this person's perception of you? Now think about a relationship that matters to you. How much of yourself does that person actually know? Not the version you present, not the version that has been carefully curated for their approval. The actual version, the opinions you have never expressed, the feelings you have translated into something more palatable, the needs you have consistently suppressed because expressing them felt too risky. And if you stripped away everything you have managed and filtered and softened in that relationship, how much would remain? And this is the difficult question that you need to address. Is the closeness you feel in the relationship genuine closeness, or is it the closeness that comes from being very good at making the other person feel understood while remaining carefully hidden yourself? And finally, the most direct question that I can ask is, when you imagine the version of yourself that expresses genuine opinions, holds genuine positions, says what they actually think without filtering, what would other people's reactions be? Does that feel like freedom, or does it feel like danger? Because the answer to that question tells you almost everything you need to know about how deeply this pattern is running you. And this is where you need to be able to stop, reflect, have an introspection, and see if this is what you truly want. Because you have become an approval seeker. You have a pattern that you have kept reinforcing, self-reinforcing. Every time the pattern is followed, every time the genuine opinion is softened, the genuine need is suppressed, the genuine self is filtered before it reaches expression. It produces a short-term reward. The approval arrives, the relationship feels safe, the conflict is avoided, the discomfort is postponed, and the operating system learns this works. This keeps people close. This keeps things smooth. And this is the correct strategy. And every time the pattern is followed, the lesson is reinforced until that pattern stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a personality. Oh, I am just someone who does not like conflict. I'm just someone who cares about how other people feel. I'm just naturally very accommodating. None of these things are false, but none of them are truly sort of fully truthful either. The full truthful is that the pattern has been learnt over the years in an environment which no longer exists now. The exit from this pattern does not come through deciding to care less about what other people think. That instruction, just care less about what people think, is useless to someone whose entire operating system has been calibrated around the threat of disapproval. It's like telling someone who's afraid of heights just to be less afraid. The exit comes through something slower and more specific, through the accumulated experience of expressing genuine opinions and discovering that the relationships worth keeping survived them, through the discovery made only through actual experience, not through thinking about it, that disapproval is not that bad after all. It can be survived. It's survivable, through the gradual, imperfect, uncomfortable process of bringing the actual self into contact with the world and finding out what happens. It's not comfortable. It does not happen quickly, but it's the only way that it will work, because you cannot think your way out of a pattern that has been installed into the subconscious mind through experience and practice. You can only experience your way out of it by being truthful on every simple, small step in every scenario. And that's how you will rewrite the software in your subconscious mind.